My dear participants, we carry on our lecture on realism, anti-realism debate, because this is one of the very central issue in contemporary analytic philosophy. So now let's welcome Professor Maducchanda Sen, who is a professor of philosophy at Jadavpur University, who will be giving another lecture on realism, anti-realism debate from her own perspective. Her main research area, includes philosophy of mind, critical thinking, and she's, author of many highly acclaimed articles and books. So let us welcome Professor Sen. So over to you, Professor Sen, now.
I'm not sure where I should be sitting when I talk. Should I go there? Yeah, it would be a little less, it would be quieter there. So can I come? I just do one thing. Nirmalu, you need to mute your speaker.
It's muted.
No, is it? No, there is an echo. Your volume has to be switched on.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I'll just see if I can share my screen. Okay, give me just a second. Can you see the screen?
It's coming. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, good. Okay. Should I start now?
Yes, please.
Okay. So just now we have heard Professor R.C. Pradhan's lecture on the realism, anti-realism debate. So it was really amazing how in a very short period of time, Sir could discuss the key figures in the debate, in the contemporary form that the debate takes. What I am trying to do here is a little different. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to talk about how traditionally realism was discussed and how in the past, let's say 50 to 80 years, the entire debate has taken a completely different form in the hands of Michael Dummett. And what I'm trying to do is to show why Michael Dummett felt the necessity of, discussing our age-old problems regarding realism, but discussing them from a completely new perspective. So this is how I have designed my lecture. Okay. Now, traditionally, we take idealism as the thesis that is antithetical to realism. And consequently, when we see anti-realism, this name anti-realism, as the opposing thesis, we wonder whether it is idealism that we are talking about or whether it is something other than idealism that we are talking about. And those of us who have keenly, followed the debates regarding universals in Greek literature, we often take nominalism or conceptualism as the thesis that is antithetical to realism. I hear that you had in the morning session discussions on universals, and you know that realistic views of universals were opposed by conceptualists or nominalist views about universals. So one might think that anti-realism means nominalism. But then what is anti-realism? And why is it that we need to talk about anti-realism as a thesis that is directly opposing to realism and not talk about idealism or nominalism. So what we shall do today is trace how discussions regarding realism and its opposing views radically changed with Michael Dummett, and how Michael Dummett is actually suggesting a kind of semantic twist. And he's saying that this semantic twist needs to be taken in the entire discussion about realism. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to make justice to the kinds of debates that we take to be debates regarding realism and anti-realism. So this is our plan. Now, before going into Dummett's discussion, we first try to understand how realism was traditionally conceived. We may start with an encyclopedia definition of realism, a definition that we get from R.J. Hurst. He says, realism is a view that material objects exist externally to us and independently of our sense experience. Realism is thus opposed to idealism, which holds that no such material objects or external realities exist apart from our knowledge or consciousness about them. The whole universe thus being dependent on the mind, or in some sense mental. So we see from this definition that realism is actually talking about the mind-independent existence of the material world, whereas idealism is opposing that view. Okay. Now, if we look at this traditional formulation of the thesis of realism, then we notice two things. And it is very beautifully, articulated by Crispin Wright, Dummett's a student and an anti-realist. He says in his book, Realism, Meaning and Truth, realism in its traditional form embodies a kind of mixture of modesty and presumption. So it is very humble in a way, and in a way it is very proud. Now, why is it called modest? It is modest because it claims that the world is not our own making. So we have not really made this world. The world is not a construction of the human mind. In what sense is it not a construction of the human mind? It can exist even though it is not conceived or understood or thought about by the human mind. And in this sense, it is not of our own making. And also, it is believed that the world and the things that there are in the world are governed by certain laws that may be, in principle, impossible for us to know. So, the world moves in ways which may be such that we are, in principle, incapable of knowing how the world moves. So this is really a very humble claim. We are saying that, we are being very humble about our cognitive capacities. We are saying that our cognitive capacities are, in a way, limited. And our abilities in construction of the world is absolutely nil. We haven't constructed it. Now, why is it that we are saying that? Not only is the realistic claim modest, but it is strangely also extremely presumptuous, extremely proud. It is presumptuous in the sense that it also claims that we have two capabilities, we have two capacities. It says that we, in suitable circumstances, are capable of discovering the real nature of the world. And the second capacity that we have is this: we are capable of having actually the right kind of concepts that allows us to discover the real nature of the world and the things in the world. And we also have the ability to articulate this knowledge of the real nature of things and the world in language. So you see, on the one hand, there is a very humble claim saying that human mind is limited. And on the other hand, we are saying that the human mind can achieve this impossible task of knowing the world that the human mind has not constructed. We often think that the first claim, the humble claim, is actually a metaphysical claim. And the presumptuous claim is an epistemological claim. And the metaphysical claim may be called the independence claim, because it is talking about the independence of our world, that in the sense that the world is independent of the knowing mind. Okay, so this is the independence claim. And it seems to conflict with the epistemological claim, which actually says that the cognitive capacities of the human mind is so great that it is able to discover the true nature of the world, and that it does because it is endowed with concepts that makes it possible for the human mind to know the world and also articulate the knowledge in the human language. So these two claims seem to conflict. And most of the critique that we find in the history of philosophy against realism stem from this. Okay. Now, it seems to us that there are certain problems with this independence claim. Okay, so the problem lies not in both the claims, but in one of the claims, which makes the other claim dubious. So, if we accept the independence claim, then the kind of epistemological ability that realism wants to endow the human mind seems impossible. So what are the problems with the independence claim? In talking about the independence claim of realism, I am really depending upon a fine book written by Professor Chanda Gupta. The book is called Realism versus Realism. Okay, Realism versus Realism. So here Professor Gupta says that when we say that the world is independent of the knowing mind, we are actually saying that the world transcends the mind. Or rather, it transcends the cognitive capacities of the mind. And she says that actually the world may transcend the cognitive capacity of the human mind in three senses. In three senses. We may make sense of this transcendence claim in three ways. The first is the transconceptual claim. What is being said is that the world is independent of the knowing mind in the sense that we do not have any concepts that can help us to grasp the mind, the world. Okay. So the mind has no conceptual capacity of comprehending the world, so to speak. Okay. So all our concepts are falling short of grasping the real nature of the world outside. We cannot even conceive how the real world could be. Okay. The second sense of transcendence is the sense of transcognitive world. What is being suggested here? We are saying something less radical. We are saying that, we may be able to conceive how the world might be. But whether the world really is the way we think that it might be is doubtful. And so, whether our, conception of the world matches the world is a matter of great skepticism. And so, we can never seriously make any kind of knowledge claims regarding the true nature of the world. So, in that sense, the world is transcognitive. Okay, so I may not be able to have justified true beliefs about the true nature of the world. The third sense of transcendence is the idea of a transphenomenal world. Here we are saying that, no, the world can be conceived of, and we may be able to, have knowledge of the true nature of the world. But it is impossible for us to, have that world with its true nature be revealed in our experience. And in this sense, the world is transphenomenal. And whichever sense of transcendence we are taking, we would become that kind of transcendent realist with, with transconceptualism as the most radical one and transphenomenalism as the most toned down one amongst the transcendent realists. Now, there are other problems with the independence claim, not only the problems with our understanding what transcendence means, but there are other problems. Now, if I say that whatever is real, whatever is really real has to be mind independent, then we may be in a fix. Why? Because suppose we want to say that we are realists about the mind and the mental. How are we to understand realism regarding mind and the mental if we think that in order for a thing to be real, it has to be mind independent? The problem lies in the fact that how can mind be mind independent, right? So that is the problem. We may, try to bypass this problem by saying that, you were wrong to suppose that there is a mind which is actually other than the body. So if we really reduce it to mental states to bodily states, then it is not a problem at all. Just as we know about physical objects, we may be able to know about mental states because they are nothing but brain states. But we know that there are thousands and thousands of problems with reductionism. And so I'm not going into that, but you can well imagine that this line of argument won't suffice. So there are several problems in understanding the independence claim. Now, what are we to do? Are we to give up the independence claim then? There has been a trend in recent years, and I'm not saying that this trend is absolutely recent and this wasn't present in classical thought, but it has gained a lot of attention these days. There is a trend where we are trying to rethink the way we view realism, and transcendental realism may be given up in favor of a more mitigated, more humble realism, let's say. Okay. Professor Gupta, Chanda Gupta, has actually suggested that traditional transcendent realism is based on the belief in a kind of sacrosanct dichotomy between how things are in themselves and how things are presented to us. So, traditional realism faces all these problems and comes up with a rather dubious notion of transcendence or independence only because it believes in the distinction between appearance and reality, the distinction between how things are in themselves and how they are presented to our mind. Okay? And those who think that this way of doing realism in the transcendent mode may not be the only way of doing realism, have really opted for what is known as the immanent stance in realism, where it is being said that by the simple fact that something is given to my mind in a particular way, it does not mean that it is not real. So the distinction between appearance and reality, which was regarded as sacrosanct, need not be so sacrosanct. So we have, come up with immanent realisms, which we find in the works of Hilary Putnam, when he is writing about his internal realism, and also in the works of the person that I have been talking about, Professor Chanda Gupta. Well, I'm not going to go into that discussion because that would require another lecture. What I am going to do is now I am going to start talking about Michael Dummett. And I shall also show you how, he is not only helping us rethink how realism can be conceived, how the debate can be conceived, but in a way, he's also nudging us towards better realisms, though he himself is an anti-realist. So he is, in a way, nudging us towards better realism. Okay. So why do we need to move away from traditional way of understanding the realism, anti-realism debate? We see that Dummett is actually taking a kind of semantic twist, giving a kind of semantic twist to the debate. Okay. So what is this semantic twist? Hang on, I think I have gone. If we notice, then we will see. So if we look, then we will notice that traditional realism or anti-realism is always a view regarding entities. Okay, whether a particular kind of entity has objective existence in the sense of having mind-independent existence. Okay, First of all, Michael Dummett reminds us that realism or anti-realism are not really global doctrines. So they are not doctrines to be regarded as applying to all kinds of entities. Rather, they are local doctrines. So I may be a realist about physical objects, but not a realist about mental states. I may be a realist about morals, and I may not be a realist about the past or the future. So realism is always about this or that class of entities, even in the traditional fold. Michael Dummett says that realism and anti-realism are not doctrines which are to be understood as doctrines about entities. Rather, they are about the nature of truth. So the first part of his work has been, concentrated on making us understand that we were actually not quite correct about what was the issue at debate. So he's saying that, the realism-anti-realism debate is not a debate about whether a particular kind of entity has objective existence or not. Rather, it is a debate regarding the nature of truth. Now, that might seem really strange, right? But he gives us arguments. He's saying that we are concerned, when we are concerned about realism and anti-realism, we are concerned about the question whether a class of statements have objective truth value. Okay. Now, this might sound extremely bizarre now, but we are going to move very slowly, and we will try to understand why Michael Dummett is, claiming this. We may ask him that, what do you mean by class of statements? He would say, I'm not talking about realism about physical objects, but I am talking about the nature of truth of a class of statement about physical objects. I'm not talking about the objective existence of universals, but I am debating about the objective truth value of statements about universals. I'm not talking about the objective existence of mathematical entities or mental events or future or past or moral values, but rather I'm disputing about the nature of truth of statements regarding mathematical entities, mental events, statements in past tense, statements in future tense, statements about moral values, etc. Dummett calls these classes of statements about which we are asking the question whether they have objective truth value, the disputed class of statement. Okay. Let us first try to understand what he means by, the question whether a particular disputed class of statement have objective truth value or not. Let us first discuss this, and then we will go into the point why we need to shift our attention from objective existence of entities to the objective truth value of sentences of a particular class. Okay? I hope I'm not going too fast. সত্যব্রত, খুব তাড়াহুড়ো হচ্ছে না তো?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. It's all right. Perfectly all right.
Some feedback? Few?
Yes, ma'am, it's all right.
Am I going too fast?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am, it's
No,
all
ma'am, it is okay to proceed.
No, ma'am.
Okay, anyway, since there is no response, I just go on.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Realism about a disputed class of statement is the view that that particular class of statement have objective truth value. Now, what do we mean by that? To say that a particular statement has objective truth value is to say that it is either objectively true or objectively false. Now, what do we mean by that? We mean by that this. These sentences are either true or false, independent of our ability to know them to be true or to know them to be false. Okay. So their being true or false is in no way related to or dependent upon our ability to discern them as true or false. For a realist, about the disputed class of statement, the statements are true or false, even though we may not have any possible means of recognizing them or verifying them as true or false. So this idea of truth has often been named as verification transcendent or recognition transcendent notion of truth. So what they are saying is that there is some sort of objective states of affairs whose holding would make that particular class of statement true, no matter whether we are in a position to verify that those states of affairs are actually holding or not. And they would be false objectively when such states of affairs would not hold, even though we have no ways of knowing that they do not hold. So we may never have the possibility of knowing whether that state of affairs holds or not, which would make the statement true or false, and yet the statement would be true if it holds and would be false if it doesn't. So we may not have evidence for their truth or falsity, and yet they would either be true or false. They would either be determinately true or determinately false. The notion of truth that is adopted by the realist is a kind of evidence transcendent notion of truth. Every statement of the disputed class is determinately false or determinately true. And this principle that the realists believe in is known as the bivalence principle. Okay. So we see that Dummett ties realism with the belief in bivalence. So I shall be a realist about physical objects. How do I understand this position? He says, no, you cannot be a realist about physical objects because we are not concerned about entities. We are concerned about truths of a particular class of statement. So how can I be a realist about statements about physical objects? If I believe that the principle of bivalence applies to the class of statements regarding physical objects. So this is what realism is for Michael Dummett. Now, why is it that we need to, change our focus from entities to truth? This becomes now the question that we need to explain. This way of characterizing the debate, Michael Dummett claims, is far better because he thinks that entity realism is not a viable form of realism because it cannot accommodate within its fold many kinds of theses which we would really certainly want to call realism. Okay. So there are different brands of realism, and we cannot formulate every realistic thesis in the same way as a kind of entity realism does. Okay, so he says that we need to change our strategy from a strategy regarding entities to a strategy regarding truth of statements. Okay, so let us give some concrete examples. His favorite example is realism or anti-realism about past. Just as we can ask questions of realism and anti-realism about physical objects, we can ask questions of realism and anti-realism regarding past or future. And in fact, there are philosophers who have debated about this. A.J. Ayer is against realism about past. We can dispute about the mind-independent existence of physical objects, but we cannot have a dispute about the mind-independent existence of the past. Why? Because the past is not existent. Okay, it's the past, right? So how do I understand the realism about past? Okay. So if past objects are not existent at all, so there is no question of their existing independent of the mind or dependent upon the mind. It doesn't make any sense. So we really need to reformulate realism about past, and we no longer talk about realism about past entities, but rather we talk about realism about sentences in the past tense. And how do we understand that? We would now talk about realism about sentences in the past tense by saying, do you believe in the applicability of the principle of bivalence regarding on statements about the past? Do you believe that? So suppose I have a sentence like, in 1919, on 9th of January 1919, at 4:17 p.m., Jawaharlal Nehru was having a cup of coffee, and he spilled that cup of coffee on his white kurta. Suppose I have this sentence. It is about a past event. It is about a past person. Okay? So what would realism about this sentence amount to? We cannot really say that it is about the realism about Nehru or Nehru's white kurta or the cup of coffee. What are we talking about? We are saying that would this sentence be either true or false, even though we have no way of recognizing it as true or false, even if we do not have any evidence that would conclusively prove the truth or the falsity of this statement. And if in the answer to this question, someone says, yes, it would be true or false, no matter whether we have any evidence to prove its truth or falsity, then one would be a realist about past discourse in past. And if one says, no, I have to rely on evidence in order to say it is either true or false, then one would be an anti-realist about past. So this is how we may at all be realists or anti-realists about the past. So you see, by shifting our attention to the objective existence of entities, to the objectivity of the truth conditions of the statements in past tense, we are finally able to make sense how the talk about realism and anti-realism about past can be at all sensible. Similarly, when we talk about, mathematical realism or anti-realism, when we see mathematicians talking about it, we will, if we inquire, we will find out that they are often not talking about whether mathematical entities have objective existence. They are not really concerned about that at all. Then what are they concerned about? They are concerned about whether a particular statement, mathematics, is true, even though we have no way of proving it to be true or false. For example, the Goldbach's conjecture. Okay, so you know that we do not have any proof of truth of that sentence, if of that conjecture. If someone says that even though we have no way of proving it to be true or false, it is either true or false, then that person would be a realist in mathematics. And he doesn't have to, be a Platonist and say, numbers are ideas in a third realm or that kind of stuff. Okay, so realism or anti-realism about mathematics may make sense to us only when we shift our attention from mathematical entities to statements in mathematics. So this is why Michael Dummett feels that we have to give up our talk about entity realism, and we now have to talk about statements about a disputed class of entities. Okay, so this is why there is a kind of semantic shift that we notice. Okay, so we see now that realism anti-realism issue is an issue relative to discourse. And here I would like to read out from Crispin Wright. To conceive that our understanding of statements in a certain discourse is fixed by assigning them conditions of potentially verification transcendent truth is to grant that if the world cooperates, the truth or falsity of any such statement may be settled beyond our ken, that is, beyond our ability to prove it. So we are forced to recognize a distinction between the kind of state of affairs which makes such a statement acceptable in the light of whatever standard inform our practice of the discourse to which it belongs and what makes it actually true. The truth of such statements is bestowed on it independently of any standard we do or can apply. Acceptability by our standards is, for such statements, at best, merely congruent with truth. Realism, in Dummett's sense, is thus one way of laying the essential semantic groundwork for the idea that our thought aspires to reflect a reality whose character is entirely independent of us and our cognitive operations. So he is actually here, Crispin Wright very beautifully is saying that we are not really having a completely new debate altogether. We are not. His trying to make us understand. Let us now again try to, no, what I was saying is that, having said that, now we are going to turn to what Damit thinks is wrong with semantic realism. So now he has told us that the realism, anti-realism debate is actually a debate within the theory of meaning. And the question is actually a question regarding truth. He has said that. But then he is going to, put forward, thank you, his arguments in favor of semantic anti-realism. And Professor Pradhan had made some kind of groundwork for our discussion regarding the arguments that Damit gives against semantic realism. And he did mention Donald Davidson. And when we look at the arguments that Damit is giving in favor of his semantic anti-realism and against semantic realism, he has in mind Donald Davidson and his truth conditional theory of meaning. So, so we can thus conceive of the metaphysical debate between realists and their opponents, anti-realist, in a particular region of discourse D as concerning whether the sentences of D can plausibly be viewed as possessing potentially verification transcendent truth conditions. And I'm quoting here from a fine author, Alexander Miller, who has a book called Philosophy of Language. And in the last chapter of this book, he discusses Damit's arguments against semantic realism, and I'm following that. Realism, as thus conceived, appears highly intuitive and is apparently hinted at by some of the most influential philosophers of language that we have considered in this book, he writes. Davidson, for example, writes, "We can be realists in all departments. We can accept objective truth conditions as the key to meaning, and we can insist that knowledge is of an objective world independent of our thought and language. Realism, therefore, is this: the sentences of D have truth conditions or are truth apt, and these truth conditions are potentially verification transcendent." Okay, so realism is the view that the sentences of a discourse D have truth conditions or are apt to be judged as true or false, and these truth conditions are verification, potentially verification transcendent. What is meant by this is that these truth conditions may hold or may not hold, even though we have no way of verifying them as holding or not holding. Anti-realism, on the other hand, would claim that sentences of discourse D have truth conditions, that is, they can be judged as true or false, but those truth conditions are not potentially verification transcendent. So it will be true if we can verify it as true. It will be false if we can verify it as false. Okay. Now, Davidson's truth conditional theory of meaning is this, in an absolute nutshell. Meaning of a sentence is its truth condition. Therefore, knowledge of meaning of a sentence has to be knowledge of the truth conditions of that sentence, because the truth conditions of the sentence is the meaning of the sentence. Truth conditions of a sentence can be understood in two ways, in a realist way and in an anti-realist way. If you are a realist, you would believe in the verification transcendent truth conditions. And so, to know the meaning of a sentence, we have to know the truth conditions of the sentence, and that truth condition is verification transcendent. If you have an anti-realist view about truth conditions, then those truth conditions would be not verification transcendent. Conditions, or verification dependent truth conditions. So to know the meaning of such a sentence, we have to know the truth conditions of the sentence, and the truth conditions of that sentence would be dependent upon our ability to verify it as either true or false. So it is not verification transcendent. Now, we see that Michael Dummett is giving us two arguments in favor of his semantic realism. One is known as the acquisition argument, and the other is known as the manifestation argument. Both of these arguments are actually reductio arguments. Okay. So let us first have the acquisition argument. Okay. Suppose we are considering some sentence B, which could be, it will rain tomorrow. So it is a sentence in the past tense, in the future tense. Now, we intuitively understand this sentence, don't we? We do. We know if I say, it will rain tomorrow, you understand this sentence, right? Suppose for reductio, the sentence of this discourse, which is discourse about a future, have potentially verification transcendent truth condition. Let us, by reductio, assume this, because we are going to, we are going to refute this claim. That is what a reductio argument does. It first assumes the claim that it tries to refute. Okay, so this is the realist claim, that the sentence, it will rain tomorrow, has a potentially verification transcendent truth conditions. And we have also admitted that we intuitively understand the meaning of this sentence. Thus, the first premise would be, we understand the sentence, it will rain tomorrow. This is premise one. The sentence, it will rain tomorrow, has verification transcendent truth conditions. This is premise two, and this is the realist claim. So Michael Dummett is going to dispel this claim, but he first assumes it. 3. To understand the meaning of a sentence is to know its truth conditions. This is the truth conditional theory of meaning. So this is premise 3. 4. When we understand the sentence, it will rain tomorrow, we know the verification transcendent truth condition of this sentence. This is by the premise 1, 2, and 3. We are deriving the fourth premise. 5. If I have a knowledge, then I must have a way of acquiring the knowledge. This is a simple truth. Suppose I have a knowledge. How can I have a knowledge? I must have acquired it. So there must be a way of acquiring it. Okay. So this is a new premise that Michael Dummett has. That is, I must have a way of acquiring the knowledge of the truth conditions of the sentence it will rain tomorrow, because I know the meaning of it. So I know the meaning of it means I know its truth conditions. So I must have a way of acquiring the knowledge of truth conditions. So I must have a way of acquiring the knowledge of the verification transcendent truth conditions of the sentence, it will rain tomorrow. Right? Therefore, I must have a way of acquiring the knowledge of truth conditions of it will rain tomorrow, which is such that I may not be able to know if the condition holds or not. And this final, this final conclusion is taking us to a patent contradiction. So I'm saying that I can know what cannot in principle be known. I can acquire the knowledge of something that is in principle impossible to acquire. Okay. So, of course, by reductio, the assumption of the realist must be false. So the sentence, it will rain tomorrow, does not have a verification transcendent truth condition. Okay, so this is his acquisition argument. Now we go on to the manifestation argument, which is very similar to the acquisition argument, only it has a kind of Wittgensteinian reference. Suppose we were considering a region of discourse D, the moral discourse. So we have a sentence, capital punishment is wrong. Then let us see how the argument will go. We understand the sentence as being the sentence, capital punishment is wrong. Suppose for reductio that the sentence S has verification transcendent truth condition. This is the realist claim. So to understand the meaning of the sentence is to know its truth condition. This is the truth conditional theory of meaning. So from 1, 2, and 3, we get 3 dash. We understand S, that is, we know the verification transcendent truth conditions of the sentence S. We then add the following premise, which stems from the Wittgensteinian insight that understanding does not consist in possession of some kind of inner state. Rather, it entails the possession of some practical ability. So we may add this premise for, if a speaker possesses a piece of knowledge which is constitutive of linguistic understanding, then that knowledge should be manifested by the speaker in the use of language. That is, in their exercise of the exercise of the practical ability which constitutes linguistic understanding. What would it be in this case? I mean, if, understanding the meaning of a sentence is the knowledge of truth conditions, how would I manifest it? I would be able to recognize when the truth conditions hold. If it holds, I'll say, oh, yes, it holds. That is my practical ability. And if it doesn't hold, I would be able to say, no, it doesn't hold. That is my practical ability. It now follows from 1, 2, and 3, our knowledge of verification transcendent truth conditions of the sentences of discourse D should be manifested in our use of those sentences. That is, in our exercise of the practical abilities which constitute the understanding of D. Now, since such knowledge is never manifested in the exercise of practical ability which constitute our understanding of D, it follows that we do not have the knowledge of truth conditions of D. But we do understand what this sentence means. Capital punishment is wrong. We do understand. So understanding the meaning of that sentence does not involve the knowledge of some verification transcendent truth conditions of the sentences of the sentence, as the realist would claim, because such a knowledge is impossible to manifest. So these are the two arguments that Damit gives, and you see that these are arguments purely based on theses that come from philosophy of language, having to do with semantics. So you see how now we have shifted our attention from entities to, semantics, and we have been able to accommodate all the varieties of realism and anti-realism within its fold. And we now also have seen how an anti-realist may bring forward arguments against semantic realism in the semantic way. Thank you.
Good. Okay. We in the second part of our lecture on realism and anti-realism debate, we got to know the the detailed arguments provided by Michael Dummett, where a metaphysical version of realism is transformed into a discussion on a concept of meaning, a theory of meaning of the statements of a particular discourse. So I would like to request our participants if they have any questions or clarifications to ask for. So please come forward.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. Am I audible? Hello. Hello, ma'am. Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, wait. I need to put on my speaker. Nimalu, you put off your speaker.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Ma'am, thank you very much for this enlightening lecture. I have a few confusions. So the first thing is following the acquisition argument and manifestation argument regarding the positions of truth condition realists. So if they are believing in the verification transcendent truth conditions, so my question is, if they are receiving any one propositions, and if they have to judge the truth value of that proposition, how they are doing that? I mean, it is impossible to judge the truth value of any proposition from their position.
Whose position? Whose position?
Truth condition realists who are believing in verification transcendent truth condition.
That is the point of Damit. Damit is trying to say that you are. There is a echo. What Damit is trying to say is that under the realist view, the truth condition is verification transcendent, right?
Yes.
So let us take the sentence, "It will rain tomorrow." Okay? And let us take the realist claim that this sentence has a verification transcendent truth conditions.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And by the truth conditional theory of meaning, I have to know the truth condition in order to know the meaning of the sentence. Okay?
Yes.
And by the realist claim, we have said that the truth conditions are verification transcendent. So I have to know the verification transcendent truth conditions of this sentence, "It will rain tomorrow."
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Now, if I have to know this, I must have a way of knowing it.
Yes. That's what I'm.
So if they are verification transcendent, then how do I know?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes. So this contradiction is
So what Damit is saying is that, by your supposition, I must have a way of acquiring knowledge of the truth conditions, which are such, the truth conditions are such that I may not be able to acquire the knowledge of them.
Yes.
So this is a patent contradiction.
Yes.
So how do I deal with this contradiction? By dispelling the realist view. Which is that view? That the sentence, it will rain tomorrow, has a verification transcendent truth condition. It does not have a verification transcendent truth condition. It has only a verification dependent truth condition. And this is the anti-realist view.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much, madam. And another question is the property of transcendence you talked about in independence claim of realism. There are three transcendence claims. One is conceptual, second is cognitive, and another is phenomenal. Conceptual is the most strong one, and phenomenal is the weakest one, you told. So are they independent of each other? Is there any relationship among them?
No, they are not independent of each other in the sense that if someone is trans-conceptual, she has to be both trans-cognitive and trans-phenomenal.
Okay.
So you can understand what kind of relation it might be.
Yeah.
And it would be a good exercise to think which are the philosophers who would be trans-conceptual, if there is any such philosopher, who are the trans-phenomenal philosophers, trans-phenomenal realists. It would be interesting to find.
And another question is being a practicing philosopher who holds the position of truth condition realist. I mean, it is almost impossible to hold that position because it is such a
No, truth
problematic
conditional realism is not a position.
Okay.
Position is a semantic realism.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but that is
No,
also
I
very
don't think it is an impossible position. This is a position that that Donald Davidson held, and I believe that Damit's manifestation argument and acquisition argument may be answered from Davidsonian point of view. There is a possibility, I believe, but it would require a great deal of homework, and it would require a fuller understanding of what Davidson understands to be the business of learning a language, understanding a sentence, understanding truth conditions, etc. Okay.
Can you please tell the name of the books and articles where we can find the reply of Donald Davidson?
I can send you some articles. I'll send you a reading list.
Okay. Thank you very much, madam. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Any other question or clarification?
Hello, ma'am. Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
May I ask you something? Okay, ma'am. Can you please explain the sixth condition of acquisition argument? Actually, I'm not getting properly. So.
Okay. Can you see it now? Mohua,
Yes,
can you
ma'am.
see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's go through it again. 1, we understand the sentence, it will rain tomorrow. This is premise 1. 2, the sentence, it will rain tomorrow, has verification transcendent truth conditions. This is the realist claim. From 1 and 2, we get 3 to understand the meaning of, this is the truth conditional theory of meaning premise. To understand the meaning of a sentence is to know its truth conditions. And now from 1, 2, 3, we get 4. When we understand the sentence, it will rain tomorrow, we know the verification transcendent truth conditions of this sentence. 5, if we have knowledge of anything, then we must have a way of acquiring that knowledge. In this case, if we know the meaning of the sentence, it will rain tomorrow, by knowing its truth conditions, then I must have a way of acquiring the knowledge of those truth conditions. Therefore, I must have a way of acquiring the knowledge of the verification transcendent truth conditions. So the truth conditions can be there, though I might not be able to recognize that they are there.
Yes.
The truth conditions may be there, but I may not have the means of acquiring the knowledge of the truth conditions. This is what we are saying. So from this, we get a contradiction. Therefore, I must have a way of acquiring knowledge of the truth conditions of it will rain tomorrow, which is such, the truth conditions are such that I might not be able to know if the conditions hold or not. So this is a contradiction. So the premise from which this contradiction follows, that is the realist view, that the sentence "it will rain tomorrow" has verification transcendent truth conditions, is false.
Yes, ma'am. It's clear now. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, I guess in that case, we end this lecture session today. In the morning, we had, lectures on the problem of universal. And in the post-lunch sessions, we had lectures on realism, anti-realism debate in contemporary analytic philosophy. So once again, we convey our sincere thanks to Professor Maducchanda Sen for her, very nice, lucid, and detailed, exposition of some of the main, points in the debate on realism and realism. So thank you, all the participants. So see you tomorrow at 11. We have one lecture in the morning, and then we have presentations. And similarly, after lunch, we have one lecture session, and then we have another scheduled presentation. So, so thank you again. So see you tomorrow at 11.